Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, The Insider Threat is Real, with cybersecurity expert Derek Smith. You're also joined by Beyond Trust Senior Director of PAM Product Marketing, Scott Lang, who will run through a brief introduction and demo of Beyond Trust towards the end of the webinar, so be sure to stick around for that. My name is Sarah and I'm your host today. Before we dive into the webcast, I just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items. First thing, all attendee lines are muted. However, we love keeping these webinars interactive, so please submit your questions via the chat box in the GoToMeeting console. You should find that on the side of your screen. I will be moderating those throughout the webinar, and we will try to cover your questions at the end of the webinar during our Q&A time. Also, today's session is being recorded, and as attendees, you will all receive the link to the recording and to the PowerPoint via an email later this week or early next week. The recording will also be available on beyondtrust.com. So at this point, I'd like to turn the phone over to Derek. Derek, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please take it away. It's all yours.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited about this. I think it's going to be fun. You're going to get some good information here. Real brief about myself. Again, my name is Derek Smith. I spent 18 years as a federal agent before going into cybersecurity. I also served in the Air Force, Army, and Navy, while some of that doing investigative work and done intelligence work and some other things. I now work at the National Cybersecurity Institute. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Initiatives. So I want to talk to you today about how real the insider threat is. Many of us know about insider threat. We appreciate it. But we spend so much time looking at things that's happening outside of our organization, looking at the hacking and all the things that go on every day in the news, critical infrastructure, that we sometimes forget about insider threat. And today I'm going to bring that back to your mind and tell you why it's very important to remember that. Before I do so, I want to tell you a quick story. Because as I said, I spent 18 years as a federal agent, and I had the opportunity to see insider threat firsthand and see what it can do. So I want to give you a quick example of one of the cases that I had, and although this wasn't a cyber threat, it was insider threat, because insider threat is about people, humans, and behavior. So I was a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigation stationed in Turkey, and I had a woman and a man. These are my perpetrators. The woman was a contracting officer working in the base contracting office, and her husband worked in the legal office. So for our contracts on base with the Turkish nationals and everyone else, we had checks and balances. The contracting officer would, of course, find contracts and do all the paperwork, and then someone in legal would look at this and make sure everything was okay. So you can already see where I'm going with this and the problem we had. Well, there's always indicators that I talk about people looking for, and people start noticing things. They were always going on extravagant trips. You know, they had a boat where actually they were using a contractor's boat, I found out. They were using a contractor's beach house. They were doing all these things. So, of course, it brought attention to them. Let me tell you, most criminals, most folks get caught because they can't keep their mouths closed. So getting back to the story, when I did my investigation, I found out that they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she was taking the contracts and giving them to companies, you know, Turkish national companies that were doing business with the federal government, with the Air Force in Turkey. And then they would go over to legal, where her husband would grab those contracts, he would review them, and then, of course, he would give him his blessing. So I'll tell you, both of them, they may still be in prison now, but they both got prison time for doing this. However, that's just an example of how real the insider threat could be. All right? So with that being said, let's talk about what we're going to speak about today. I'm going to tell you, just like I did before, about the insider threat battles. What is the insider threat? Who are they? Okay? I'm going to tell you about types of insider threats. I'm going to tell you how you can detect insider threats, and I'm going to give you a framework for insider threat detection and remediation, how we can deal with this insider threat. So what is the insider threat? CERT says, CERT first of all have a definition of insider threat, and CERT is the organization, you know, this is the emergency response team that deal with not just insider threat, but IT or cybersecurity issues in general. And they say that an insider is a person with legitimate access to or associated with some aspect of the environment of the system of that organization. Okay? They have increased opportunity and they have better knowledge in comparison with outside intruders. Hackers have to break in and learn things on their own. They have to enumerate. They have to go out and find out about your organization. These insiders already have all that information. And the insiders usually have a clearly defined motive. They have a reason for why they're doing this. Revenge, financial gain, other type of things that I'm going to talk about throughout our presentation. So a little bit about who this insider is. And I have references for this, so this is not just Derek speaking on his role as an investigator, but these are people who are actually finding out these things by doing studies on them. But anyway, those I said before who work for a target organization or those having relationships with that firm or that organization that has some level of what we call authorized access. This can be employees, this can be contractors, business partners, customers, heck, it could even be your family members. For all that matters, people are coming in, and when I'm saying they're not being malicious, but they do something accidentally, and I'll talk about that later on. FBI survey found that insider attacks have now surpassed viruses as the common cause for security incidents in the enterprise. There's a lot of it happening that you don't hear about. We hear about the sensational things that we find on television that I go on and speak about, but we don't hear about these inside type things. 25% of respondents felt that over 40% of their financial losses were actually due to malicious actions by insiders. You catch that number? 40% of their financial loss was due to insider activity. Let me just pause to say this. Although hackers and other folks, foreign governments, whatever it may be, can cause damage to your networks and to your organization, it shows that the most damage can be and often is caused by insiders. The Identity Theft Resource Center says that data breach due to insider theft 13% was 13%. Right? And the U.S. Secret Service says that 67% of the respondents for their crime report reported insider attacks are the most costly and damaging types of attacks. Now you see there's some older dates on this, but I stay up on these things, and these numbers have not changed a great deal. Now, I just want to talk about I want to give you a couple of scenarios of some insiders and insider threat actors that we are familiar with in the past. All right. The first one, of course, we all know who that is in this picture. This is Edward Snowden. And by the way, I live in Washington, D.C., and we're now, I shouldn't say we, they're now filming a story on Edward Snowden in the area. I saw them out yesterday. The film crew and everything were filming in front of the White House yesterday. So this guy has become anti-hero, a hero, whatever it is. He has a movie now. But NSA contractor Edward Snowden, he leaked classified information into certain NASA programs. Now, the thing about it, and by the way, I worked for Booz Allen just as he did, this made him a privileged user. He had access to all types of information. But the important thing about Edward Snowden is that he did not have a need to know for this information. So I'll tell you this, there was something wrong with that system where he was able to access and get information that he should not have been privy to. Detection failed due to lack of enforcement of the monitoring tools that were available, okay, or that maybe were not available. But something happened. There was a breakdown somewhere, as we can see. Some other blasts from the past. When I was an agent, I remember all these cases very well. But Aldrich Ames, former CIA counterintelligence officer and analyst, he sold out his colleagues to the Russians for more than $4.6 million. As it says, he was convicted of spying for the Soviet Union and Russia in 1994. And of course, Robert Hansen. He's caught selling American secrets to Moscow, got $1.4 million in cash and diamonds over 15 years. He got life in prison for doing his particular activities. And I can tell you all kinds of stories, and these lists go on and on, from military folks to folks like Robert Hansen, who was a higher up in the FBI when he was doing this activity. Okay, so it comes from all over the place. Or it comes from the person that don't even know what it is that they're doing. And we'll talk about that as we go on. Let's talk about what insiders do. Here are some of the things that insiders want to try to do with the access that they obtain. Facilitation of third-party access to sites and information. They want to get access to your sites, to your information, so they can sell it, use it for whatever they want to do. Information has a price on the hacker market. Credit cards has a price, but you know what? I could buy a credit card number for $5. If I buy your HIPAA medical file, I would have to pay about $500 for that. But what I'm saying is that there's a market for that. Also, they want to directly sabotage some of your activities. Say if it's your critical infrastructure or your system in general, the goal is to sabotage it. They want to get unauthorized disclosure of information or get your information so that they can disclose it. They do it for financial reasons, and they do it for just theft. And some even do it just because they're a cowboy and they want to show that they can. They want bragging rights. Let's look at the types of insider threat. And first of all, I want to start with the 4 different types of insider. And the first thing we have is a pure insider. And this insider is an employee who has all the rights and access associated with being an employee. So they've started with the company. We gave them the right to come on and do certain things. Now, this employee usually has keys or a badge to allow them into the organization, and they have their user IDs, their passwords, and things that allow them access to the company's network. Okay? What we call this is authorized privileged access. Okay? Now, let me say that this person, the pure insider, is the most dangerous type, as they can cause the most damage to your organization based on that access that we give them. The second one is the insider associate. And this insider associate, these are people such as contractors like your cleaning crew, your security guard at your building if you have any, who have limited authorized access to your facility or network. So they're authorized, but it's very limited. Of course, the guard walking through the building should not be able to get onto your network system, nor should the cleaning crew. But they do have access. People leave things on their desk. People leave computer screens up and open, right? These folks are not company employees, and they don't need full access to your network. But while these folks do not have access to your company's network, they often have limited access that's going to give them contact with important company information, as I just told you about, okay? And many of these folks have access to your facility at night. So that makes it even more important that you watch what they're doing, that you not watch them, but you're cognizant of what they have privy to. Okay? They can actually read, or worse, they can even copy sensitive information that employees often leave out on their desks, or, as I told you before, unlocked on a computer. So even if you left this information on your desk and then lock your doors, remember that the security guards and the cleaning crew often have a master key, and that can get them through most locked doors. Okay, so employees have to remember that there are other people who can gain access to their offices, and therefore sensitive information needs to always be secured, right? Makes sense. That's common sense. Number 3 is that inside affiliate. And an inside affiliate is somebody like a spouse, friends, your clients, clients of other employees that work around you, your children that you bring into the office. Not malicious, right? But basically, this could be simply them coming in and visiting and obtaining a badge that gives them access to your facility. And if that person goes to the restroom and on the way wanders around looking at what's on people's desks or computers, he or she can glean some sensitive information that they probably shouldn't have looked at, right? And then the last one is that outsider affiliate. Now, outside affiliates are non-trusted outsiders who can open access, who use open access to our systems, like wireless service to gain access to companies' resources. If the companies happen to have an unprotected access point and this outside affiliate is sitting across the street, let's say at a coffee shop, he or she, as a matter of fact, can connect to the company's wireless connection and then maybe get access to your information. I do want to take a step back, and we talked about associates and things like that. A lot of breaches come not from activities from your employees, but from the people you do business with. Look at the Target breach, and it happened from an air conditioning company that had access to Target systems. So although, let's just pick Target for a moment, or any organization, but even if they have great controls, great security controls within their organization, they could have a problem because they use a vendor who may not, the cleaning crew. Well, the cleaning crew have to come in and log into the computer when they come into the building. So now they have some access, and they have at least something to log into your system. Now, what if I was to get that person's password, get into the system, and now as a hacker, I can escalate my privileges and get access to other information. That cleaning crew probably does not have the same level of security that, let's say, Target has. So you see my dilemma here. Excuse me. All right, so let's look at who might be undertaking insider activity. So I told you the type of insiders, but now we're going to look at who's actually doing this type of thing. And this is just a few examples. But of course, terrorists and their associates. You know, we hear a lot of things in the news these days about terrorists having very, very sophisticated abilities when it comes to hacking. You know, we have moles. And what I mean by moles is a couple of different things, but there are companies, remember, I do this every day, and some of you probably do as well. But there are folks who actually have folks hired into your organization to become spies for that company to try to get trade secrets, you know, try to get some type of competitive advantage. So they'll know all about your hiring process, how to answer the questions correctly, and they'll go get a job at your organization and then report back. Of course, foreign intelligence agencies, so foreign intelligence services. And along with that is also nation states who have lots of time and lots of money to try to infiltrate your organization. I highlighted disgruntled employees and malicious employees, of course, because this is the true insider. You know, there are lots of disgruntled employees who may do something in order to gain revenge or hurt their organization, get back at you. And then you just have those malicious ones who just want to do that, you know. Now, oftentimes, this is not, this doesn't happen with the disgruntled malicious person. It's just someone who's leaving the organization now, want to impress their employer, and so they take some of the information with them, proprietary information. You have cowboys in the organization who consider themselves beyond any policies. Now, who am I talking about there? How about a system administrator who says, well, I'm the sysadmin, you know, they have a password for using their computer when they, as a sysadmin person, and they have a password that they can use when they go out, say, to the internet to do some research or to do their banking and things like that. But yeah, I'm the sysadmin, I know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to use that. I'm already logged in with my sysadmin account, so let me just go out and check the internet real quick, check my bank statement, and I'll come back in. You know, they think that the rules don't apply to them. These are your cowboys. People who have issues with your company, commercial competitors who are looking for competitive information, and even journalists who are trying to find something out that they can report on. Sorry, I'm pushing the button and waiting for it to move forward. Okay, so what do? Their main goal when it comes to insider threat, or any hacker, let's say, is the number one, get in and escalate their privileges by impersonating someone else. What I mean by that, I gave you an example of someone who gets the password from a cleaning crew person, or let's say the receptionist who works there. She's going to have limited access. My goal as a hacker, of course, is just to get in the door first. Once I'm inside the door with the receptionist or whomever's password, now I can search around, take my time, and find a way to escalate my privileges, meaning get access to higher level information that I shouldn't have access to. Privilege escalation by exploiting vulnerabilities. Again, I'm going to look for vulnerabilities I find in your websites, your pages, whatever it may be, your network, so I can exploit those and again escalate my privileges. Or I already work for the company. Let's say I work for the company and I'm the receptionist, again, not to pick on any receptionist, but I'm curious about what other people make in the organization. So I'm trying to, because there's a hole somewhere, I abuse my privileges that I have as an insider already to move around and look at things that I should not look at. When I used to be a special agent at the U.S. Postal Service, and I had a case where folks were doing that with the senior executive services. They were getting access to their files to see what the senior executives were making. I know you heard about the folks at the IRS. I used to be a treasury agent also, by the way, but at the IRS, we had a person who, of course, was trying to look at Obama's tax information. I think you all heard about that. That was in the news quite a bit. Social engineering attacks. They use the information that they get from insiders. And let me tell you, insiders do this by, let's say I see this all the time. I'm on Facebook and I see someone complaining about their employer on Facebook, where of course everybody can see it. But bad guys can use the information that they glean. They can do what we call, when I was an intelligence guy, they can gist other information about what's going on, and they can use that to launch social engineering attacks. And of course, there's colluding attacks. And what I mean by collusion is the example I gave with the husband and wife. You have two parties working together to perpetrate a crime, and therefore they've colluded. They have collusion. Let's look at the different types of insider behaviors. Okay, so you have your insider here, and you have the person who deliberately penetrates with intention of abusing their position. Again, this is the person looking for information either to take with them because they're going to a new organization, or they just want to be nosy, as I said, with the person who wants to see payroll or whatever it may be in the organization. They don't really mean any harm. Even that sysadmin going out and doing things, he doesn't mean harm. He's just doing things that are not allowed, that are not within the policy, and therefore he or she could cause damage because they don't know what they're doing is wrong. You know, if they tell you not to hook a device up to your computer, don't plug anything into your USB from outside, and you plug it in, you don't know what you're bringing into the environment at this point because you just plugged that thing in at the internet cafe when you were traveling to another country last week on vacation. We don't know what you're plugging in. You have the opportunistic exploitation of access once you're in your position, your post. Okay. Again, it's just an opportunity that came up. I want to see, you know, Derek just walked by. Derek is the executive VP. I wonder what he makes. I'm going to go in and check. This is opportunistic. They weren't planning this. This is not deliberate penetration. All right. Next one is exploited by others once they're in their position. So now they, what I mean by this is that once that perpetrator, that mole, or whoever get in, now they take advantage of the opportunity to exploit and try to escalate their privileges as I described. You have ex-employees, as I told you before, who take things with them because they want to impress another employee. Or I'm going to say this. I won't say I've been guilty of it, but when I was in the military, I go from one military base to another, and we had all these good things that we built at one place doing the same job. Of course, I would copy all this stuff on the disk, and I'd take it with me so I can get there and press out my my higher-ups with, hey, look what I brought in and what I can do. So there's no intention of doing anything bad, but once again, I'm taking, this wasn't, you know, this is all Air Force information. If you're going from company to company, you're taking one person's proprietary information and sharing it or giving it to another, and you don't know what they can do with that information. And you have, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. But that one, I'll just tell you what it said. It was the unwitting person who does this by mistake. So again, they go out to a website. Well, let's go back to the classic one. I received an email and it said my Facebook account has been compromised. Oh, forbid that my Facebook account has been compromised. I have to deal with that situation right now. So I click on the link that's been provided to me, and I unwittingly unleash malicious code onto our system that allows somebody to embed a rootkit, let's say, where they can go in and out of our network as often as they would like. But getting to the point here, results show that it can take more than 87 days for an organization to discover insider fraud. Now, to be honest with you, I've seen reports where it can take up to 300 days to find out that a hacker or whomever is on your system. So just think about the information that could be gathered during that time. I tell you that the sophisticated attacker's goal is not to break your system, bring down your system, or anything like that. Their goal is to stay undetected for as long as possible in order to gather as much information as they possibly can. That's what the real sophisticated folks want to do. That's what the nation states and everybody else want to do by taking your insider privileges and using them to do something else. So what are the consequences of this insider activity? Well, there could be damages to your companies or your own reputation, of course. It could be damage to relationships that you've built between you and your competitor, not competitors, but your the folks that you work with. There could be actual damage to your buildings and your assets if we talk about critical infrastructure. I told you yesterday, I think I told you, but yesterday we had a power outage here in the Washington, D.C. area. That brought people to start thinking about critical infrastructure protection, and therefore, you know, what would happen if that was actually an attack. It could bring disruption to your processes and your procedures within your organization, or your operations in general could be shut down. It could be a disruption to your IT systems. Let's take a look at this little thing. So for corporations, oh, geez, I'm sorry. How can I go back? Thank you very much. So we look at corporations. I click once and it doesn't go. I click again. I'm going to stop doing that. But we look at corporate. It could be commercial and financial impact on your corporation. We can lose competitive advantage by the information that someone carries over to someone else or someone gets by planting a mole or wherever it may be. It can affect national security. As I said, with a building going down or critical infrastructure or something that happens to the grid or a water system, we can have big problems with that. You know, denial or restriction of services. facilitation of criminal and terrorist activities against those organizations. I think about a year ago, you might recall that there was an attack of a, I think it was a water treat. I can't remember what it was. A station in California, and it was two attacks. It was an armed attack and a cyber attack at the same time. You know, that's what we're looking at. Maybe someone tried to bring down a facility physically, and somebody is hacking the facility as well. If a power station goes down, not only is it going to affect things right away, but it's going to continue to affect things for quite some time until they get that back up, which could be a week or a month away. Compromise and protectively marked information. If you have sensitive or marked information, be it government or be it your corporation, we're talking about national security here, so government, we can compromise all type of things like Snowden did, for instance, or like some other folks have done that have caused, as you see in my last box, loss of life or harm to people who are doing operational things in the field. What are their motivations? Why are people doing these things? Well, of course, financial gain, right? We want to make some more money. That's the top of the list. People are doing it because they want to make money. You know, they find a way that they can make some money. Okay. Just real quick, I had an insider case again in Turkey where I had a friend. It was a friend of mine, of all people. He worked in the Postal Service, and he was using his information he had about postal operations and how they work in order to hide his activity. The reason I found out about his activity is unfortunate because criminals are sometimes stupid, and he bought a helicopter kit with his, and he was building a helicopter. And where did he get that money from? Well, he had embezzled $80,000 from the Postal Service using his insider knowledge, and basically he used those things that you send for bills. I can't think of it right now. Money orders. He had a money order scheme going on. People do it for revenge because they're upset with their employer. Their employer has done something wrong. They've been fired, whatever it may be. They do it for revenge. The cowboys, I won't even say cowboys, but the outsiders, the hackers who do it for status and recognition. Hey, I hacked Sony. You know, I hacked Target. I hacked whatever fill in the blank organization you want to put there. People do it for friendship and loyalty. Hey, I want to help a friend. You know, they started a business. They need some clients. Let me go into our client file, take some of that, take some forms, take all the things you need to set up his business. Oh, man, that's a big no-no. It might be ideological reasons, or it could be fear or coercion. Somebody could actually be threatening you to bring them this information. All kind of motivations. The list goes on and on. Now, we have the motivations. We have what they're doing. Now, let's talk about how do we detect insider threat, and next how we stop it. So possible indicators of threat. Let me say this. There's no one single factor. There's no one single thing. There's a lot of things you have to look at. Mainly, I find out for two reasons. People talking too much or people buying too much. All right? They're buying things that you know they can't afford at their salary, or they get, you know, when somebody does a crime, it is no good if I have to keep it inside and can't tell anybody about it. So if somebody's going to go to a bar or someplace, tell a friend, they're going to talk about it. Okay? What we look for and what we have is there are clusters and specific combinations of those things, talking and buying, whatever it may be, that's going to alert us to this possible threat. Now, there might be some alternative explanations for that, but we have to weigh everything together, put it all together, combine it, and see what it is and if that alternative explanation takes place. The main thing that I'm looking for is changes from their normal behavior. We have a baseline. This is how Derek normally acts, but look at Derek now. He's a big spender. You know, he has this big new car. You know, he's talking a lot. He's bolstering about the things he's doing. We look for changes in normal behavior, and I'll expound on that in just a moment. Okay? We have to assess it in the context of the employee role, the activity. What is his normal activity? What does he have access to? And did he have the opportunity and the capability to cause harm by whatever activity he's engaging in? And then we look at the legal issues and make sure that we're not being discriminatory towards people based on what it is they're doing in their behavior. You know, we're looking at true fraud indicators, true insider threat indicators. And that's what we're going to base our decisions on. So let's look at these possible indicators a little bit closer of insider threat so you can take this back with you and actually use this information. We look for behaviors of concern, such as individual behaviors, individual vulnerabilities. Is that person drinking too much? That person has some habits, some gambling problems. I worked in Las Vegas for 10 years as an agent, And I would see people do all kind of things as insiders based on they owe somebody some money, or they just have a gambling habit and they need some more money to now go out and do these things. People take advantage of those vulnerabilities. They can exploit those vulnerabilities. Changes in lifestyle and work behaviors, as I told you before. First of all, let me say this. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, this is cybersecurity. We should be talking about cybersecurity. All this happens because it's human and it's behavioral. When we talk about insider threat, we're talking about human behavior. We're talking about looking at behavioral things and paying attention to those. There's not a lot of technology. We talk about some things we can do in combination, but you got to combine technology. I was going to say there's no technology alone. You have to combine technology, and you have to combine behavioral things and educational things in order to combat this. Look for changes in lifestyle. Look for suspicious behavior again, buying too much, saying too much, trying to get access to too much, asking questions that they should not be asking, as Snowden was doing. Look for those type of things. Unauthorized behavior again, Snowden, looking at things that he shouldn't look at, trying to find things that he shouldn't be finding, access things he shouldn't access. Let's explore this a little more. Now, greater the number of indicators present, because it's not one of these things working together. You see, I have them interlocked with the warning in the middle. The greater the number of indicators present, the greater risk that we have, the greater the risk. Okay? We look for combinations and clusters of these possible indicators. Individual vulnerabilities, we talk about that. Addictions, personality traits, those type of things. They may have some alternative explanations for them. We looked at changes in lifestyle again, their timekeeping, decreased quantity and quality of their work, obvious changes in their financial status. On their own, this is not necessarily an indicator. As I said, they might have some alternative explanations. And then suspicious behavior include visiting classified areas, abusing access to their databases. Again, on their own, not necessarily indication, but when it comes to these type of activities, alternative explanations become less likely. If I am abusing my access to databases, if I'm using asking coworkers some strange questions, probably going to be hard to explain those away. And of course, unauthorized behaviors, taking protective or sensitive material home without the permission to do so. Photocopying sensitive material. Why am I over there copying these things? Serious security issue, and it's hard to explain these away. You probably can't. So now, how do I detect it? It's my job. This is what we have to do. Now, first thing we should do is look at utilizing existing personnel security measures, making sure that we have the right measures in place in order to ensure that these type of things are not happening. Protective monitoring is one. Automated alerts and audits to detect unauthorized entry into our IT systems or our work areas. Are people in places that they shouldn't be? Even if there's a person that should be in there, should he be there at that time? If my sysadmin that I told you about works at night, why am I seeing them log in at 8, 9, 10 in the morning? There may be a logical alternative or explanation for that. Might be working somebody else's shift. But at least we have to be alerted, as you see, to that so that we can question it. Our aim is to develop practical and reliable tools to support the decision that we're going to make about insiders. It's going to be some type of psychological decision that we make based on what it is that we're seeing. All right, case studies show that evidence of behavioral concern about insider. Case studies basically show this. There are always some type of indicator. We just have to recognize them and look for them. Okay. We want to develop checklists that we can use that can be applied when we are in the recruiting stage. The best place to catch people that are potential insiders is in the recruitment stage. When it comes to references and things like that, really do check those references. Really do find out something about the person that you are hiring. I did an entire blog on, do you know the person that you're working next to? Do you trust them? Because what happens is this. If I come to work for you tomorrow from Booz Allen, as Snowden did, there's automatically an element of trust. Oh, he's one of my coworkers. He works here. It's okay to leave this on the desk when we go to lunch because he works with me. Well, you don't know the background of that person. You don't know what checks were done, and you don't know anything about that person. He has not really earned that trust. And even if you've been working with a person for a year, do you really know? So you have to, and I'm saying you, but that personnel, that's where it starts, in personnel, in the recruitment stage and in the interview stage. I have security interviews and things like that. You have to watch that person. You have to be cognizant of what these people are doing. Some examples of procedural solutions include prevention by pre-hire screening, as I said before. And what's most important to me, of course, I work in an educational setting, but I truly believe this, and that's training and educating your employees. Number one, to recognize when they see activities going on, and number two, to know what they're doing so they won't unintentionally become an insider themselves. Okay, that's what these use policies and all that is for. But we have to be, this have to be emphasized on a regular basis, not just once a year where I watch a video and I click through it while I'm also on Facebook and doing other things just so I can fulfill the requirement. One of the things we have to do as security folks is establish good audit procedures. Are we looking at what people are doing? You know, we all have all these audit logs. We collect all this data. It's no good unless someone comes back and look at it or has a good way to report something to you, and then we got to read the report. Okay? Disable access at appropriate times. So when a person leaves, let me tell you another quick story. I promise not too many more stories. But when I was working at Booz Allen Hamilton, we had a layoff of 1,000 people. So everybody was shaking in their boots about who's going to be laid off. But here's the problem. Folks who were lower-level employees, lower to mid-level employees, as soon as they got notice that they were laid off, they had to pack their things and be escorted out of the building. The higher-ups, let's just say one of my bosses, he made over $1 million a year. But the higher-ups were allowed 30 days before they were going to be relieved of their duties. Let me ask you this. Does Derek, as a mid-level employee, have more at risk with losing my job? I can go out tomorrow and probably get another security job. Or does that $1 million person who has 30 days access to all the materials, is he more of a risk? I argued that, and you know and I didn't win that argument. But here you have an organization, and I'm sorry if you own it, but you have an organization that that's letting a guy who earns $1 million and have all the reason in the world to take some proprietary information with him, either to start another business or go elsewhere, have 30 days to collect that information. That's unthought of, and I apologize if the Booz Allen folks on there had mentioned the situation, but it's a real situation because the insider threat again is real. Develop practices, best practices for prevention and detection of insider threat. You know, as I said, separation of duties and least privileges. I gave you an example of that husband and wife. We had a separation of duties. You know, that was just collusion. That just happened. That's one of those things that happen. But make sure those things are separated. Strict password and account management policies. Okay. Policy-based solutions are hard to enforce because, again, I keep stressing this. We're dealing with the human factor. And the human factor is the weakest link that we have within security. How do we prevent and deter these things? I'll give you a quick process here. First, we want robust pre-employment screening, as I spoke about. This is just Derek speaking. This is just one way. There are many ways, but let's look at this model. Prevent those with intent from joining your organization in the first place through pre-screening. Okay? Identify those who could be vulnerable. You know, drinking problems, gambling problems, spending problems, whatever their habits may be. We have to identify those. I'm not saying identify them. This is not the minority report. We don't identify them and take action. We identify them and then we pay attention. We teach our employees to pay attention. Now we have comprehensive ongoing security measures like limiting their privileges, limiting opportunities to take advantage and be opportunistic and, you know, and take advantage of some of these activities. You know, maximize deterrence. And even with that, that's policy. Make it, you know, set the example if you have to when it happens. I'm not saying pick somebody, but, you know, you have to show that we're serious about this and maximize the deterrence for it. You know, provides means for your employees to safely report their concerns, report what they're seeing. And also when they come to your reporting, they'll say, no, I've been knowing Dirk for 10 years and he never do anything like that. No, listen to them. Give them a way to report where they say, I feel safe reporting to you. I feel okay with that. All right. Positive management practices. Reduce disaffection with the person. What I'm saying is manage the person. Pay attention to your employees and figure out what's ailing and what's bothering them, and then you can deal with it and not have a disgruntled employee in the first place. Strong security culture, education, appreciating the threat and the responsibilities of your people, compliance, awareness, being awareness to signs, teaching it to folks, okay, being willing to report. All right. Down the road, what can we do? What's happening down the road? What's coming as far as we're concerned with, and we're getting close, folks, so bear with me, but what's coming? So we have things like Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX. Basically, SOX, this holds executives personally liable for computer security. And how do we do that? By making them pledge that companies' security mechanisms that they have in place are adequate. They have to do that. Notice of security breach laws. Majority of states enacted some type of legislation that makes us have to notify when there's been a breach. Require companies and other entities that have lost data to notify their customers. And you know that something just came out with the president just a week or two ago about this type of thing. People have to report. Okay? Situational awareness is important. And you're going to be talking about some of this type of stuff with Beyond Trust in just a few minutes. But, you know, being aware of the situation that we have. You know, how do we deal with the situation? How do we put layered security in place? You know, how do we put good threat models in place? These are the things we're looking at down the road, and we'll talk about that in a minute, of some things you can do to make this insider threat problem maybe not go away, but lessen it and maybe lessen the damage that comes along with it. Now, there are some CERT, I'm going to do this quickly, there are some CERT best practices. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I've highlighted a couple. Clearly document and consistently enforce your policies and controls. As I said, make that a detriment. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. I don't want to scare everybody. I don't want to sound like that, but they have to know. They have to be educated about it. Incorporate insider threat awareness into periodic security training for all employees. And again, catch the word periodic, not once a year. You want to catch people and train them constantly. Begin with the hiring process. I've said that many times, I'm not going to talk about it. Going over to the second side, develop a formalized insider threat program to really deal with the situation. We have them for outside threat. Let's develop it for inside threat as well. And then close the doors to unauthorized data exfiltration in the first place. Have things, I mean, we look at things coming in the organization. Are we looking at things going out? Are we paying attention to the kind of information that's going out? Let's look at that. All right? So I want you to remember a couple things. Remember this. Insider threat actors are not hackers necessarily. You do have hackers that take advantage of insiders by doing social engineering and things like that to get access, but insider threat is, for the most part, not from hackers. Insider threat is not a technical or cybersecurity issue alone. Again, we have to work with behavioral things in conjunction and knowledge in conjunction with the technical. A good insider threat program should focus on deterrence, not so much detection. We want to detect, of course, but we want to deter the behavior in the first place, right? Detection of insider threats has to use behavioral-based technique. If we're dealing with a human issue, behavioral-based issue, we have to have behavioral-based techniques to go along with the technologies that we put in place. And the science of insider threat detection and deterrence is still in its infancy because we pay more attention to the external threat. We're not paying as much attention to the internal threat. It's happening more now because every day in the news something is happening, but there's still so much more to be done. So you all, I hope that you've enjoyed and learned a few tidbits today with the examples I gave you and the information that I've shared with you. And now I want to turn it over to my gracious host, and they can tell you a little bit more about how you can deal with the insider threat.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Derek. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Lang. I manage the product marketing group here at Beyond Trust, specifically around the solutions for privileged account management. You know, I really appreciate, Derek, the background stories that you offered, all the context, all the real-world examples in the webcast so far. Some of those are eye-opening, and they definitely lend to the reality of the insider as one of the most significant risks in any organization, both behavioral as well as from a technology perspective. So I want to take the opportunity to talk about what Beyond Trust does to help mitigate insider threats or the risks of insider abuse, specifically with regard to privileged users. So recently we did a survey showing that something like 25% or more of companies still have no process or capabilities to control the actions of privileged users. And that was, a shocking statistic for us to realize. But, peel back the layers a little bit, and honestly, it's not that surprising that that number is still so high. The reason is there's really a balance that every organization needs to strike between security and productivity. Ultimately, those are the two ends of the seesaw that we're looking to, to balance on a daily basis. What happens when you dial up security? You lock everything down and productivity drops. But when you dial down security, you end up being a headline, and nobody wants that. And nowhere is this more clear than in the security domain. Than the gap that really emerges between protecting the business to ensure continuity and enabling users and admins to be productive. And privileged account management is the area that I think really bubbles up to the surface from an insider risk and threat perspective that really explains this challenge pretty clearly. So what's the answer? I mean, how do we strike that balance or close that gap between protecting the business and enabling privileged users without really inhibiting their productivity? We really believe that three things or three deliverables or three steps or capabilities are essential to bridging that gap. The first is delivering a broad and deep privileged account management capability that covers every scenario of a privileged user. And that helps IT and security teams be more proactive and less reactive. For example, a single point of management, policy and reporting helps to establish and enforce controls proactively. You spend less time detecting and less time reacting if you have this this infrastructure in place. Second is detailed reporting for multiple stakeholders. Chances are you as an IT and a security professional are producing reports for one subset of leaders or managers or or others in the organization. You've got multiple different stakeholders you have to address with security information, compliance information, to prove that your operations are tight and you're meeting all your requirements. So the need to produce that reporting, visibility, and insights is paramount to closing that gap. Basically getting smarter, if you will. And then finally, really the third critical capability that we see to close that gap between privileged user capability and business risk requirements is integrating with other security domains, not just privileged account management, but giving you a more complete picture of IT risk and context across your environment. Because a privilege problem isn't just a privilege problem; it includes other affected areas as well. That's really what is at the heart of that. Right? So the gap between privileged users and business risk is out there. Closing the gap requires a couple of critical capabilities. And what I want to do now is just kind of walk you through our PowerBroker privileged account management solutions and what we do to help address those challenges every day. We deliver privileged account management solutions across four categories. In fact, really every category that that the industry and our customers identify as critical areas of managing privileged users. The first is privileged password and session management. This is all about managing privileged passwords, rotating passwords and SSH keys, auditing all password activity. This type of capability helps you to automate privileged password and session management. Provides access control, auditing, and alerting for pretty much all types of privileged accounts: local and domain shared administrator, service accounts, application and database accounts, SSH keys, and more. This is essential capability because this is the one that, or I should say, a lack of a solution in this particular area is what we read about in data breach cases most often, where someone's privileged credentials or a privileged password has been hijacked in some way and utilized for some nefarious purposes. So that's one capability that we deliver. The second is privilege management, either on servers or desktops. So, for example, managing privilege and shared accounts for Unix, Linux, and Windows servers, allowing IT organizations to efficiently delegate Unix, Linux, and Mac privileges and authorization without disclosing passwords. But also from a desktop perspective, elevating Windows admin privileges and managing least privileged deployments. helping you to eliminate local admin on all Windows desktops and systems, and then having you elevate privileges by application and not by user. It definitely closes an attack surface, especially when you align the ability to elevate those privileges by application based on the knowledge of vulnerabilities in that application in and of itself. Third capability we deliver on is an Active Directory bridge, or helping organizations to utilize Active Directory to authenticate into Unix, Linux, and Mac environments. That centralizes authentication for Unix, Linux, and Mac. It also helps you extend a group policy to non-Windows platforms, so you've got centralized configuration management as well. Really, the fourth area that we deliver privilege account management capabilities into is in the area of auditing and protection, or auditing all access and system changes, addressing compliance, and enabling rollback of unwanted changes to AD objects. This is across the spectrum of the Microsoft environment. And the real value of this approach is that it's very comprehensive. As I said, it's delivered as modules and integrated platform, delivers deep analytical insights, and is really extensible across the security landscape. But there's more to it than that. It's not just a privilege problem, as I mentioned. One of the real values that at BeyondTrust we really deliver to our customers is the ability to look outside of just the privilege silo and integrate information as far as vulnerabilities go. So you, as security and IT decision makers, have great information to make decisions based on risk, user risk, asset risk. We can correlate information for privileged passwords, users, accounts, and systems, and apply threat analytics to that to basically give you a risk profile that you're operating under. And you can make much better risk decisions both from an insider perspective as well as an external perspective as well. So, we're proud to have earned the endorsement of several third-party industry analyst firms in our approach to addressing privileged account management problems, or addressing the issues that are brought about by insiders and insider risk. You can see some of the quotes here, as well as some of the sources of those quotes here on the slide in front of you. I won't read those to you. But in essence, a lot of very important endorsements and validation of our approach to solving the privileged account management problem. So thanks so much for your time in listening to us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah. Sarah, I believe you're going to introduce a poll here.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, guys, another poll, and then we had a bunch of questions that came in. Just based on what you heard from Scott, what you saw, would you like to receive a free trial for one of our PAM solutions? So I'm going to leave that up for just a couple of moments. If you select yes, somebody will be in contact with you to learn a little bit more, and then to send you a trial depending on what product you're looking at exploring. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Derek, could you provide a list of the behavioral indicators, in quotes, that employees are being trained to recognize in detecting and identifying insider threats?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Can you repeat that one more time for me?
No problem. Could you provide a list of the behavioral indicators that employees are being trained to recognize in detecting and identifying insider threats?
Sure. So we look for a variety of things when we do this, and I'll run through some of them. But I talked about some. One of the things I talked about for you was were changes in behavior. So you want to pay attention to what people are doing, basically. You want to look for those changes in behavior that they display. You want to look for those spending habits that they have for you. You could, let's see, I talked about exploitable behavioral traits that we have. So if the person is spending, if they're drinking, if they're things like that. Another thing is repeated security violations. If you looked at Snowden, you probably realize, I'm going to do this quickly, but you probably realize that he was doing things he wasn't supposed to do. I want to get other questions. And so they have repeated security violations that they're probably getting called to the carpet about, and you want to deal with those. If they're engaging in classified conversations without a need to know, like Snowden was probably doing. If they're working hours, as I gave you before, they're inconsistent with their job assignment. They're working, doing hours they shouldn't work. Sudden reversal of that financial situation. repeated or unrequired work outside of normal duty hours. Look for those type of things. Those are some indicators that I can give you right off the top.
Scott, this one's for you. Does Charles Roberson provide any log review tracking workflow? Perhaps after each admin access session, a manager or different system administrator have to review the log, and that process needs to be tracked and provided a trail. Is that functionality provided within the product?
Yeah, Sarah, good question. Short answer is yes. A couple different mechanisms to accomplish that. Not just log review, but the solutions, each of the different solutions in the portfolio offer session monitoring and recording, almost like a DVR style recording. And you can go back to specific points in time, replay sessions, and then save and index those sessions if you need to kind of call back for a forensic purpose, or provide some sort of audit trail for a compliance regulation of some kind. So you can accomplish it either through log management. That tends to be less helpful. A little bit more helpful is the session recording and monitoring. Hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Scott. Derek, what is the primary vehicle used by most organizations to detect the insider threat?
Well, basically, going back to my investigative days, most threats are, again, going to exhibit two things, either some behavioral or some technical indicators. Okay, and the main thing is that supervisors, co-workers, people got to pay attention to that. And then what Scott was talking about, you have to have some type of technical things that allow you to do technical audits or get technical alerts that are going to alert you to those indicators, so you as a supervisor or co-worker can go back and report those. The most effective way to deter it is to report the indicators that you see as soon as you possibly can to somebody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Derek. I got a couple other questions that came in regarding the recording. Just so I'm going to repeat that to everybody. You will receive an email from communications@beyondtrust.com that will have the link to the recording and also a link to the presentation that was used today, so you can refer back to the stats and all that other fun stuff that Derek mentioned whenever you need, and you can forward that on to your colleagues and whatnot, and they can view the recording later. So with that, be on the lookout for that. We'll probably send it within the next 2 business days, and it will be available on beyondtrust.com in our on-demand webinar section. So thank you, Derek. Really appreciate it. Very insightful. Thanks, Scott, for taking the time to talk about Beyond Trust today. And thank you to each and every one of you for joining us for the last 60 minutes. We really appreciate your time. We love having you here, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.